Imagine you're sitting in the marble stands of the largest arena in the world. You came to watch a chariot race. Around you, 100,000 people did the same. But the races don't start. The gates close. You hear the sound first, metal against stone. Locks being sealed from the outside. Then the silence starts spreading through the stands, row by row, until 100,000 people are looking at each other, not understanding what's happening. Then you see the soldiers. They're not positioned to protect anyone. They're positioned to make sure no one gets out. It's January, 532 AD. The emperor has made his decision, and by the time night falls, the marble beneath your feet will be soaked in blood. Not of gladiators, not of enemies, of Constantinople's own people. But to understand how a city reaches that moment, you need to know the woman who stopped it from being even worse.
Theodora was born around 497 AD in the most unlikely place possible for a future empress. Her father tamed bears at the Hippodrome. That wasn't a metaphor. It was literally his job, walking into an arena with wild bears to entertain the same crowd that would one day kneel before his daughter. When he died, Theodora was barely 10 years old. Her mother had no income, no protection, nothing. In a city of 500,000 people, they were invisible. To survive, Theodora was pushed onto the stage. And this is where the story turns cruel. Because in 6th century Rome, actress wasn't a profession. It was a legal classification. Actresses held the same legal status as prostitutes. They couldn't own property. They couldn't testify in court. They couldn't marry men of senatorial class. Roman law had decided, before she was old enough to understand what it meant, that Theodora would never belong to the world of power. But Theodora had something Roman law didn't know how to classify. She was extraordinarily intelligent and extraordinarily difficult to ignore. At 16, she left Constantinople, abandoned by a lover in Egypt. She survived alone, spinning wool, living in cities she didn't know, in a world that offered no safety net for women without family or money. When she came back, she was a different person, not softened by the experience, hardened by it. Justinian saw her and couldn't look away. He was the emperor's nephew, destined for the throne, surrounded by courtiers who spent their entire lives trying to please him. And he chose to fall in love with the one woman Roman law forbade him to touch. To marry her, he had to wait for the emperor's wife to die. Then he had to convince his aging uncle to repeal the law that banned marriages between senators and actresses. He did both. In 525, they married. 2 years later, Theodora was crowned Augusta, the most powerful living woman in the known world. But what no one expected, not Justinian, not the court, not the historians who came after, was what she would do with that power. Theodora didn't become a decorative consort. She built her own intelligence network, parallel to the emperor's. She dismissed bishops. She interfered in religious policy. While Justinian persecuted dissidents, she secretly hid them inside the palace itself, just meters from her husband's throne. The court historian wrote 2 versions of their story. The official version, which praised them both, and a secret manuscript, written in fear, that he never published in his lifetime. When a man fears a woman and can't rationalize that fear, he invents monsters. Constantinople's aristocracy invented several. January 532, 5 days of chaos. What had started as a protest at the Hippodrome had turned into the largest fire in the city's history. The Hagia Sophia in flames, the Senate in flames. Half of Constantinople, reduced to ash. And the two factions that had spent decades trying to destroy each other, the Blues and the Greens, had stopped fighting each other to unite against the emperor. They crowned a replacement. Justinian was finished. In the war council, his generals presented the plan. The ships were ready at the port. With favorable winds, they'd be out of reach before dawn. It was the only rational decision. Theodora asked to speak. What she said in that moment was recorded by the historian Procopius, the same man who feared her enough to write about her in secret. She said she would not board the ships. She said that whoever wanted to flee should flee, but that she would rather die than live as a fugitive. That the imperial purple was the noblest shroud a person could have. In a room full of men trained for war, it was the only speech that sounded like real courage. Justinian stayed. What followed was brutal. Justinian sent his generals to the Hippodrome with clear orders. The gates were sealed, the same gates you imagined closing at the beginning of this video. And by nightfall, tens of thousands of people lay dead on the marble. Control was restored. In the years that followed, Constantinople would become the most extraordinary city the world had ever seen. The Hagia Sophia was rebuilt and remained the largest enclosed interior space on Earth for nearly 1,000 years. Justinian's armies reconquered North Africa and Italy. The legal code he commissioned still lives in the legal systems of France, Germany, Brazil, and dozens of other countries. But none of it would have happened without that room, without that night, without that woman. Theodora continued ruling alongside Justinian until she died in 548, likely from cancer at around 50 years old. Justinian never remarried. She was born the daughter of a bear tamer, classified by law as less than a citizen, and died as the most powerful person in the most powerful empire on Earth. Official history tried to diminish her. The secret manuscript tried to demonize her. Neither managed to erase her. To understand what Theodora saved that night, you need to understand what Constantinople was. Forget any city you know today. In 530 AD, Constantinople had 500,000 inhabitants. Rome had collapsed to a few tens of thousands. London was a village. Paris barely existed on the map. Constantinople wasn't just the largest city in Europe. It was the only real city left. Imagine walking down the Messe, the main avenue, 25 meters wide, lined with covered colonnades sheltering merchants from every corner of the known world. Twice a week, that street became a theater. Imperial processions, incense, drums, crowds so dense the air smelled of roses thrown to mask the human scent. More than 200 underground cisterns supplied 500,000 people with water brought from over 120 kilometers away. The largest of them, the Basilica Cistern, was a submerged cathedral with 336 marble columns holding up the ceiling in the dark. This was the city burning in January 532, and there was a very specific reason for that, one that had been building for decades, in the very stands where you were sitting. The Blues and the Greens weren't fan clubs. They were the city's political fault lines made flesh. The Blues backed the aristocracy and the Orthodox clergy. The Greens represented merchants, craftsmen, and religious minorities that Justinian's policies had spent years crushing. Walking through the wrong neighborhood in the wrong color wasn't a social risk. It was a death sentence. When Justinian's tax collectors squeezed both sides to breaking point, and he refused to pardon two men who had miraculously survived the gallows, something unprecedented happened. The two factions stopped killing each other and turned together toward the palace. After the revolt, Theodora never went back to the shadows. She received ambassadors alone. corresponded directly with foreign kings, hid religious dissidents inside the palace, just meters from Justinian's throne, for years. Not out of defiance, out of strategy. She was keeping the empire's wealthiest provinces from breaking away. 30,000 people died in that hippodrome. But Constantinople survived for 900 more years. It survived because that night there was one person in the room who understood one simple thing. Power is not what you inherit. It is what you decide to do when everyone else is running away.